In the early 1970s, a really a really bizarre phenomenon started happening in public libraries all across the United States.
It's such a wild piece of literary history.
Right. I mean, librarians, whose entire job is to meticulously categorize human knowledge, began making this very specific, recurring mistake.
Over and over again.
Yeah. They would process a newly arrived book about Tarzan, the fictional vine-swinging ape-man from the Edgar Rice Burroughs adventure novels.
Quintessential pulp hero.
Exactly. And instead of putting it in the science fiction or fantasy section where it obviously belonged, they would confidently walk it over and shelve it in the nonfiction biography aisles.
Right there between, like, William Howard Taft and Mother Teresa.
Which is it's an incredible stealth operation.
It is. It's one of the greatest stealth operations in modern literary history. And the wildest part is that the librarians weren't being careless.
No, they were just reacting to the absolute unshakable authority of the text they were holding.
They completely bought it.
Which is such an incredible concept to wrap your head around. Welcome to this deep dive. If you're listening to this right now, it means you're like us.
You're looking for that shortcut to being well-informed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to unpack massive, mind-bending concepts without getting bogged down in dry academic dust.
You want the real insight, the aha moments.
Right. And you want to understand how it all connects to the world we live in today. And today, we have a mission perfectly tailored for that itch. We are diving into a literary experiment that completely broke the rules of fiction.
We're talking about Philip Jose Farmer's monumental book, Tarzan Alive.
It is a project that totally defies easy categorization.
Oh, absolutely. When you actually sit down and read the text, you realize it's operating on about 4 different levels simultaneously.
Yeah.
It's a fake biography, it's a piece of razor-sharp literary criticism, it's a foundational act of fandom world building, and beneath all of that, it's a deeply earnest love letter to the pulp fiction era.
And the core premise is just breathtakingly audacious.
Yeah.
I want you, the listener, to just hold this thought in your head for a second. What if one of the most famous fictional characters in human history was actually a real flesh and blood historical figure?
A real guy.
Yeah. And what if the novels, the comic books you've read, the movies you've seen, all of it were just a highly romanticized, sensationalized cover-up?
That is the foundational concept we are exploring today.
We're looking at the ultimate historical what-if and tracing the absolute birth of the kind of obsessive world-building that dominates our pop culture today.
Right.
So to understand how a book about an ape-man ended up in the nonfiction section, we need to start with the architect of this beautiful madness. Who exactly was Philip Jose Farmer?
Well, to understand Farmer, who lived from 1918 to 2009, you really have to understand the golden age of speculative fiction.
Okay.
He wasn't just a pulp writer cranking out dime novels. He was a Nebula Grandmaster and a 3-time Hugo Award winner.
Okay, let's unpack this. For those who might not follow the inner workings of the sci-fi literary world, throwing around terms like Nebula and Hugo, what does that actually signify?
So those are essentially the Oscars and the Pulitzers of science fiction and fantasy.
Wow.
Yeah. To win a Hugo, you are voted on by the fans, right? The readers who consume this material voraciously. To win a Nebula, you are voted on by your peers, the science fiction and fantasy writers of America.
So it's critical and commercial validation.
Exactly. So to win both repeatedly and to be named a Grandmaster means you have achieved universal respect for both your literary craft and your ability to captivate an audience. Farmer was an absolute titan.
He wasn't a lightweight.
Not at all. He was known throughout his career for a provocative blending of history, philosophy, and popular culture. He didn't just write standard space operas with laser guns, He pushed the boundaries.
How so?
Well, he explored themes of religion, sexuality, and the nature of reality long before it was fashionable in the genre.
But this specific project, this obsessive 300-page biography of Tarzan, wasn't just a random intellectual exercise for him, was it? This seems deeply personal.
Oh, it was a lifelong, defining obsession. The roots of Tarzan Alive go all the way back to when Farmer was in the 5th grade.
Wow, that far back.
Yeah. That was the moment he first discovered the original Edgar Rice Burroughs Tarzan novels. And when I say it left an impression, I mean it completely rewired his childhood brain.
Right.
It hit him so profoundly that his schoolmates actually nicknamed him Tarzan.
Because he was quite literally climbing trees and swinging from branches in his neighborhood.
Exactly.
I find that detail so incredibly endearing, but also, I mean, it's crucial to understanding the book. This isn't some cynical academic tearing apart a piece of pop culture to look smart.
No, not at all.
This is a childhood passion project brought to life with the surgical tools of a master writer.
Precisely. And that passion culminated in a book that belongs to a very specific and somewhat niche tradition of what we call fictional biographies.
Right.
Before Farmer, there were writers who played in this sandbox. You had W.S. Baring Gould writing Sherlock Holmes of Baker Street, treating Arthur Conan Doyle's detective as a real historical figure.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and you had C. Northcote Parkinson writing The Life and Times of Horatio Hornblower, and George MacDonald Fraser doing the same with the Flashman series.
No, the precedent was there.
It was. Farmer was aware of this tradition, but he decided to take it to an entirely different, almost obsessive extreme. He also wrote other Tarzan-adjacent works like Lord of the Trees and A Feast Unknown, but Tarzan Alive is definitely the anchor.
So the conceit of Tarzan Alive goes something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Farmer presents a reality where Edgar Rice Burroughs, the original author, actually met the aging real-life Tarzan.
Yes.
According to Farmer's premise, Burroughs sat down, heard the man's actual gritty life story, and then essentially acted as a sensationalist PR guy.
A hack, basically.
Right. Burroughs took the facts, exaggerated them, sanitized the brutal parts, added a bunch of impossible fantasy elements, and published them as fiction.
And then Farmer steps in decades later, claiming to be the true biographer, finally cutting through all of Burroughs' nonsense to find the real historical man.
When I look at this structure, my mind immediately jumps to modern found footage movies.
Oh.
Or even better, mockumentaries like This is Spinal Tap or The Office.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
You know, where the entire comedic or dramatic engine relies on how incredibly seriously the creators treat the totally fake subject matter.
What's fascinating here is that the comparison to Spinal Tap is structurally perfect, but the tone is wildly different.
How so?
Spinal Tap wants you to laugh at the absurdity. Farmer doesn't. This approach is what literary theorists call metafiction. Farmer adopts the persona of a naive narrator.
Okay, naive narrator.
He writes the book as a piece of earnest, meticulous, rigorous academic scholarship. He never winks at the audience. He never breaks character to say, hey, isn't this a fun joke?
So he's completely deadpan.
Completely deadpan. By doing this, he places himself firmly alongside postmodern literary giants like Kurt Vonnegut and John Fowles.
Wait, Vonnegut. Fowles. I mean, I get that Farmer was a great sci-fi writer, but comparing a fake biography of an ape-man to Slaughterhouse-Five or The French Lieutenant's Woman feels like a bit of a stretch. How does this qualify as high-end postmodernism?
Because of what he's demanding from the reader. Postmodernism, at its core, loves to play with the reader's perception of reality, right? It asks, how do we know what we know?
Sure.
By treating Tarzan as a real person whose existence has been obscured by fiction, Farmer is deliberately weaponizing the format of biography. He's blurring the strict boundary between fact and fiction to challenge you, the reader, to consider how all histories are constructed narratives.
Oh, okay, I see where you're going with this.
Think about any acclaimed historical biography you've ever read, say a biography of Abraham Lincoln. The biographer wasn't there. They have to choose which historical facts to include and which to ignore. They have to interpret the tone of a 150-year-old letter. They have to decide how to frame a political conflict.
They're piecing it together.
Exactly. They are essentially constructing a narrative out of raw, disconnected data. Farmer is doing the exact same thing. He's utilizing the exact same academic tools, the same tome, the same footnotes. He's just using a fictional character's lore as his raw data.
It's like a magic trick, relying on the authority of the tone. If he can make a reader genuinely believe in the chronological, historical reality of a man raised by apes, simply by using the dry, authoritative syntax of a historian, it really forces you to ask, how easily do we accept any written history just because it has footnotes?
That is the exact postmodern friction he's aiming for. It's a playful, sophisticated exploration of epistemology, the study of knowledge.
Right.
It demonstrates in real time how stories can be constructed, packaged, and ultimately believed. But, and this is the massive hurdle he faced, to pull that off, to make you truly believe this constructed history, he couldn't just tell a good story.
No, he had a massive problem.
Yeah.
Because Burroughs' original novels are absolutely packed with things that shatter any sense of historical or biological reality.
Exactly. If Farmer wants to pretend this is a real biography, he has to act like a forensic detective and fix the glaring, biologically impossible mistakes in the original source material. He has to rationalize the absurd.
And there's nothing more absurd in the original Tarzan stories than the apes themselves.
Oh, the Mangani?
Yes, Burroughs wrote these creatures, which he called the Mangani, as having a complex spoken language. Now, if we look at real-world biology and anatomy, great apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, they just do not possess the vocal tract necessary to articulate complex speech.
Right, they can't physically do it.
They communicate, sure, but they don't have a spoken language with grammar and syntax. And they certainly can't teach a complex spoken language to a British toddler. If you're writing a true history, that's not just a plot hole, that's a brick wall you just crashed your car into.
It is a completely world-breaking inconsistency for anyone trying to apply historical rigor. So Farmer introduces what is arguably the most brilliant fix in the entire book, the pithecanthropoid hypothesis.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because he doesn't just wave a hand and say, oh, Burroughs made the language thing up. They were just normal gorillas.
No, he doesn't take the easy way out.
Right, he leans completely into the language aspect, but he builds an entirely new scientific framework to support it.
Exactly. Farmer argues that Tarzan was not raised by great apes at all. Instead, he suggests that these creatures, the Mangani, were actually a group of pithecanthropoids.
Pithecanthropoids.
Yeah, he posits that this was a rare, localized, and now extinct branch of early hominids. And because they were hominids, closer to early human ancestors and to modern gorillas, they actually did possess the biological and anatomical capability for spoken language.
I just love the intellectual gymnastics of that. He essentially invents an entire undocumented branch of human evolution, a missing link, just to make a 1912 pulp novel make biological sense.
It's genius.
It is. And that's not his only massive structural fix.
Yeah.
He also had to deal with the timeline. Burroughs wasn't exactly keeping a meticulous spreadsheet of dates across his dozens of sequels.
No.
There were chronological anomalies everywhere. Characters aging at the wrong speeds, events overlapping.
Yes, the timeline in the original books is a huge mess if you try to map it onto a real-world calendar. So Farmer, continuing his role as the diligent historian uncovering the truth, introduces another major retcon: the hidden sun device.
Oh, this one is wild.
It is. He argues that Tarzan actually had a hidden sun, and that Burroughs confused the actions of the father with the actions of the son in later novels.
So convenient.
Completely. This hidden sun is used purely as a narrative sleight of hand to smooth over the timeline inconsistencies that Burroughs left behind.
It's incredible. When I look at the pithecanthropoid theory and the hidden sun theory, I immediately think of modern internet fan theorists.
Oh, absolutely.
You know the type. You go on Reddit, and someone has written a 10,000-word, heavily cited essay trying to fix a tiny plot hole in a Marvel movie or a Star Wars film. They contort themselves into logical knots to explain why a spaceship could travel at a certain speed or why a character survived a fall. They desperately want the fictional universe to be logically sound.
Right.
Farmer was essentially doing exactly this, but on a professional literary level, decades before the internet existed. But I have to push back a little here because there's a risk to this kind of forensic analysis.
What's your concern?
Doesn't explaining the magic of talking apes actually strip away the wonder of the original stories? I mean, if you take a myth, a fairy tale about a boy raised by wild beasts, and turn it into a dry biological thesis about extinct hominids, you kind of ruin the fun. You're taking the poetry of the jungle and replacing it with a biology textbook.
That's a highly valid critique, and it's a risk Farmer was clearly willing to take. But we have to look at how this rationalization of inconsistencies functions within the specific literary device he's employing. Farmer isn't just fixing plot holes to be pedantic or to ruin the magic. He explains within the text that Burroughs deliberately altered these facts, like inventing talking apes instead of admitting they were hominids, or messing with the timeline to protect the real Tarzan's true identity and location.
Oh, wow. So the errors in the original books are framed as intentional obfuscations by Burroughs.
Yes.
Burroughs was throwing people off the scent.
Exactly. And by meticulously correcting these errors, Farmer makes the illusion of reality so much stronger. It elevates the academic parody.
I see.
The more seriously Farmer takes the task of correcting Burroughs, the more the reader is lured into the illusion that there is an underlying truth to be found.
It's a game.
Right. If Farmer just said, Burroughs wrote a fun fantasy, the game is over. The curtain
That's so-
drops. But by saying Burroughs was a sloppy, sensationalist journalist who deliberately got the biology of the pithecanthropoids wrong to protect a state secret.
That changes everything.
It does. Farmer forces the reader to engage with the text on a completely different, almost investigative level.
It's a psychological trap for the reader. He's using the rigid, boring language of science and academia to make the impossible feel grounded.
Completely.
And once he successfully creates this scientifically plausible environment for Tarzan, complete with extinct hominids instead of magical apes, he then has the foundation to map out the actual chronological life of this real man.
Right. He can build the timeline.
He has to build a resume for nature's ultimate survivor. And that resume starts with the incredibly traumatic events of his birth.
So Farmer breaks the biography down into very specific eras, tracking the subject's life with historical precision. The narrative begins in the late 19th century. He establishes the exact date of birth as November 22nd, 1888.
November 22nd, 1888. So specific. It sounds like a date you'd read on a brass plaque on a historical building.
That specificity is the engine of the biographical illusion. John Clayton III is born in a crude cabin in the African jungle to marooned British aristocrats.
And then the inciting tragedy.
Yes. When the infant is just 1 year old, his parents are killed by the hominid chief, Kerchak. The orphaned infant is then adopted by a female pithecanthropoid named Kala.
And he is given the name Tarzan.
Right. Which Farmer notes translates to white skin in the hominid language.
So he's adopted into this primate society, and then we hit the era of his life that deals with his education. And this is the part of the mythology that has always fascinated me the most, purely from a logistical standpoint.
It's pretty wild.
Around the age of 10, Tarzan wanders back to his deceased parents' abandoned cabin. And over the next several years, using only the children's primers, the picture books, and the encyclopedias left behind by his dead parents, he teaches himself to read and write English.
Yes. Farmer asserts that by the time Tarzan is 18, he has read nearly every single book in his father's extensive library.
I really want to pause and marvel at the mechanics of that, because it is staggering. Think about what that actually requires.
It's immense.
He has never heard the English language spoken aloud, ever. He has no concept of what the sound of the letter A or B is. None.
He is sitting in a rotting cabin, matching abstract black symbols on a page to pictures of bugs and trees, entirely in a vacuum. I try to compare it to something modern, like, imagine someone learning complex computer coding like C++ or Python strictly by looking at the physical hardware.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
It's like just looking at the silicon chips and circuits without ever seeing a computer screen, a keyboard, or an instruction manual. Just deducing the software from the physical shape of the hardware. It is an almost superhuman feat of pattern recognition, logic, and deduction.
It's an incredible analogy, and it highlights just how exceptional Farmer believed this character's intellect to be. He isn't just physically strong, his brain operates on a level of raw, deductive power that most humans couldn't fathom.
But it begs a massive psychological question. If a human being's entire understanding of the world, of civilization, of morality, of human interaction, comes entirely from static Victorian text read in absolute isolation, how does that shape his view of the world? If we connect this to the bigger picture, we hit upon one of Farmer's most important and recurring thematic explorations, the concept of the natural man.
The natural man.
Yes. Farmer presents Tarzan not just as a lucky survivor of a tragedy, but as nature's last creation and a golden age man.
A golden age man. What does that actually mean in the context of a guy living in a jungle in 1908?
It means he represents an idealized, untainted state of humanity. He is the absolute antithesis of modern, industrialized civilization.
Okay.
But Farmer is doing something very nuanced with the classic noble savage trope here. Tarzan isn't just a creature of pure, mindless instinct. He isn't just an animal.
Right, because of the reading.
As you noted, his rigorous self-education is central to his identity. He is the ultimate self-made hero. He rises above the primitive, animalistic state of his hominid companions, not through magic, but through intense, self-directed intellectual learning.
So he possesses the brutal, unforgiving physical prowess of the wild, but he marries it with the intellectual capacity of a high society aristocrat. And all of it is synthesized in total isolation.
Precisely. And this unique synthesis is what allows him to function in the narrative as the outsider, as critic.
Oh, I like that. The outsider is critic.
Because his intellect was forged entirely outside of societal conditioning. He didn't go to boarding school, he wasn't taught social norms by parents, he wasn't influenced by peer pressure. He learned purely from static, objective books. He is fundamentally immune to the collective delusions of society.
He sees right through it.
Completely. His total isolation allows him to clearly see the absurdities, the hypocrisies, and the artificial constraints of human civilization. Normal people are completely blind to these absurdities because they are steeped in them from the moment they are born.
That makes an incredible amount of sense. He's reading about the lofty ideals of civilization in these books, but he's testing those ideals against the brutal, honest, life-or-death reality of the jungle.
Exactly.
And speaking of brutal reality, his education isn't strictly academic. Farmer maps out a major narrative turning point during this era of his life, his first kills. Specifically, Tarzan kills Kulonga, the son of a local indigenous chief. And the motivation is absolutely crucial to understanding his morality. He does it to avenge the death of his foster mother, the hominid Kala.
It's a primal, visceral act of justice. It operates outside of any civilized legal system, but it makes total moral sense within the laws of nature.
Yeah.
And is following this violent event that he makes the discovery that changes everything. He finds the diary, the photograph, and the locket in his parents' cabin. These are the physical artifacts that hold the key to his true identity as John Clayton III, Lord Greystoke.
Okay, so let's look at the foundation Farmer has built. We have the ultimate natural man. We have the self-made intellect. We have the uncorrupted, objective critic of humanity.
A powerful combination.
But a critic living in a vacuum is just a hermit talking to the trees. The ultimate test for an outsider who critiques civilization is what happens when he inevitably collides with it.
And not just collides with it. The true test is what happens when he falls deeply, irrationally in love with a representation of it.
Yes. Which brings us to the next massive shift in Farmer's chronology, the collision with civilization.
This is where things get really complicated for him.
Farmer maps out this first contact occurring in February 1909. Tarzan, who's now around 20 years old, a fully formed apex predator and self-taught genius, sees white people for the very first time in his life.
And among this marooned group is his own cousin, William Clayton.
Right, who currently holds the Greystoke title that rightfully belongs to Tarzan.
And of course the American woman, Jane Porter.
This arrival is the catalyst for the defining conflict of his entire life. The dramatic action kicks off almost immediately. Tarzan, operating from the shadows, saves Jane from a lioness, and later he kills the rogue pithecanthropoid Turquoise who had abducted her.
And Farmer's biography notes that Tarzan is desperately, instantly smitten with Jane.
It's the classic pulp romance setup. But Farmer is writing a psychological biography, so he focuses heavily on the aftermath, the profound renunciation. Despite his overwhelming love for Jane, and despite now possessing the definitive proof of his aristocratic heritage and immense wealth, Tarzan makes a massive, heartbreaking sacrifice.
He lets her go.
He renounces his chance to reveal his true identity. He allows Jane, along with his cousin who holds his title, to leave the jungle on a French cruiser, believing he belongs to the wild.
It is a moment of profound, agonizing tragedy, and it perfectly encapsulates his internal war. He is caught in a vice grip between his intrinsic, brutal jungle nature and the magnetic allure of civilization, which Jane completely embodies for him.
Okay, I'm with you so far. We have this deeply tragic, grounded, psychological portrait of a man torn between two worlds. It feels like a serious literary analysis.
It does.
But then as we move into the later years of Farmer's biography, tracking his life deep into the 20th century, things take a wild, jarring turn.
Oh boy, yes they do.
Farmer outlines that Tarzan actually becomes a group captain in the British Royal Air Force during World War II. And to explain how a man born in 1888 is still in peak, superhuman fighting condition in the 1940s, Farmer introduces an immortality elixir.
Ah, yes, the elixir.
I have to throw a flag on the play here. This is a massive contradiction.
It is definitely a swing.
We just spent the first half of this deep dive establishing how meticulously Farmer worked to ground this story in biology. He invented an entire hominid evolutionary branch just to avoid the magic of talking apes.
Right.
We established Tarzan as the ultimate natural man, grounded in the brutal reality of nature. Yet suddenly he ends up flying advanced fighter planes in a global industrial war, and he's chugging magic potions to stay young.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Doesn't the inclusion of an immortality elixir totally undermine the rigorous, grounded biography Farmer was trying to write? You can't spend 100 pages explaining evolutionary biology and then hand the guy a magic potion. That's a
Oh.
cheat.
You are hitting on the exact friction that makes this book so structurally fascinating and, frankly, a bit eccentric. Yes, you are entirely correct. The elixir is undeniably a super science trope plucked straight from the pulps.
Right.
It is a massive, glaring departure from the careful, grounded biological rationalization of the pithecanthropoids.
It feels like he painted himself into a corner and just used a cheat code to get out.
In many ways, it is a narrative cheat code. But we have to look at the structural problem Farmer was trying to solve as a biographer.
Okay, what was the problem?
The fictional biography format requires tracking the subject's entire life. Farmer's goal was not just to rewrite Tarzan's origin story. He wanted to explain his continued existence and relevance in the modern era.
Oh, I see.
He needed a mechanical explanation for why a man born in 1888 is still highly active, strong, and vital during the World Wars and even into the 1970s. The elixir is the blunt narrative tool that allows Farmer to bridge the gap between the Victorian jungle of the 1890s and the mid-20th century global conflicts.
So he deliberately sacrifices the grounded realism in order to maintain the chronological span of the biography. He chose longevity over scientific purity.
Exactly. And regarding the RAF service, which also seems contradictory for a natural man, we have to look at Farmer's ideological vision of Tarzan.
Right, why is he fighting in World War II?
Farmer envisions a hero who, despite his absolute outsider status, ultimately chooses to fight for the civilized world when it faces its greatest existential threats. He critiques civilization endlessly, he hates its hypocrisy, but he doesn't abandon it to fascism.
He steps in when it matters most.
He steps in when the darkness is too great. However, it is widely noted by critics that Farmer struggles to balance all these elements perfectly. While the internal conflict of Tarzan is heavily and beautifully analyzed, the romantic conflict suffers.
Really?
Yeah, critics specifically point out that Farmer leaves Jane Porter radically underdeveloped as a character.
Which makes sense, sadly. If the book is essentially a direct, sustained philosophical argument about Tarzan as the ultimate natural man, Jane ends up functioning more as a symbol than a fully fleshed out human being.
That's spot on.
She isn't a person, she's a shiny object representing the civilization he is drawn to. The focus is entirely on his internal tragedy, not her agency.
Precisely. Farmer prioritizes Tarzan's internal psychological conflict over Jane's characterization. But we need to zoom out because Farmer's ambitions for this book went far, far beyond just extending Tarzan's life into the 1940s or detailing his psychology.
Right, there's a whole other layer to this.
He didn't just want to place Tarzan in history, he wanted to connect Tarzan's bloodline to the rest of the entire literary world.
And this leads us to what is undeniably the absolute crown jewel of the book. If you, the listener, take nothing else away from this deep dive today, take this. Because this concept changed pop culture forever. We are talking about the creation of the Wold Newton family.
This is the exact moment where Farmer's project evolves from a clever, localized fake biography into a massive foundational piece of pop culture architecture.
Let's lay out the connections he makes here because they are staggering to read. Farmer creates this sprawling, multi-generational family tree in his appendices, and he claims that Tarzan is biologically related to a massive network of other famous literary icons.
It's an insane list.
We are talking about Sherlock Holmes, his smarter brother, Mycroft Holmes, the Scarlet Pimpernel, the pulp hero Doc Savage, the detective Nero Wolfe, Bulldog Drummond.
The level of genealogical detail he provides is incredibly specific. For example, Farmer asserts that Tarzan's grandfather was supposedly a minor background character in Arthur Conan Doyle's The Hound of the Baskervilles.
No way.
Yeah. Furthermore, he claims that Tarzan's adopted son eventually marries the granddaughter of Phileas Fogg, the famous protagonist of Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days.
So what does this all mean? When I look at this web of characters, I immediately think of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh, absolutely.
Or the massive crossover events in comic books like Crisis on Infinite Earth. The idea that Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor all exist in the exact same continuity.
Oh, right.
That they breathe the same air and can bump into each other in New York City.
Right.
We take that for granted today. It's a standard Hollywood business model worth billions of dollars. But Farmer was doing this in 1972. He was connecting characters across entirely different authors, entirely different genres, and entirely different publishers, decades before the MCU made it a corporate mandate.
The MCU analogy is structurally perfect, but I would argue Farmer's execution is conceptually even more audacious than what Marvel or DC does.
How so?
Because when Marvel crosses over characters, they're just saying, these guys live in the same universe. They might use a multiverse portal to bring them together, but Farmer isn't just saying they live in the same world. He is arguing they are intrinsically connected by blood. The underlying lore he invents, which stems from a real, documented historical event, a meteorite strike in Wold Newton, Yorkshire, England in 1795, is that the radiation from this meteorite genetically mutated the ancestors of all these various literary characters who happened to be traveling near the crash site.
That is wild.
This mutation resulted in branching lines of extraordinary superhuman capabilities.
It is the ultimate fan fiction origin story, but he disguised it as dry, meticulous genealogical research. He found a way to biologically explain why the Victorian era had so many geniuses and supermen.
Exactly. And this raises an important question about how we view literature itself. Critics describe this sprawling family tree as literary criticism as fiction.
Literary criticism as fiction.
Think about what Farmer is demanding of the reader here. He is forcing you to view incredibly diverse standalone works of fiction, a stuffy Victorian detective story, a pulpy African jungle adventure, a globe-trotting French sci-fi journey, not as isolated independent creations, but as one single interconnected sprawling historical tapestry of heroism.
It fundamentally changes the way you read everything. If you accept the Wold Newton premise, even just as a thought experiment, then reading a Sherlock Holmes story isn't just reading about Sherlock anymore, you're reading about Tarzan's eccentric cousin.
Exactly.
It creates an invisible, thrilling web between every single book on your shelves.
It is the absolute pioneer of the shared universe concept in modern pop culture. Farmer took the isolated, lonely heroes of fiction and argued that they are fundamentally a family. It's a profound shift in how fans engage with media. It invites the reader to become an active participant in building the mythology.
Okay, so we have all these incredible disparate concepts in play. We have postmodern metafiction blurring the lines of reality. We have biological retcons inventing extinct hominids. We have a hero's journey spanning from the Victorian jungle to World War II fighter planes.
A lot going on.
And we have this massive shared universe family tree tying Jules Verne to Arthur Conan Doyle. With all of this going on, we have to ask the practical, grounded question. Does Tarzan Alive actually succeed as a book? Is it an enjoyable read, or is it just an elaborate structural stunt?
To answer that fairly, we have to look closely at the actual architecture of the book and the ultimate verdict on its legacy.
Okay.
The structure of the book is very deliberate. It's not a narrative novel with a standard three-act structure. It is divided into 25 chapters tracking specific eras: 1888, 1898, 1908, 1919, 1929, 1943.
Very structured.
And these chapters detailing Tarzan's life are interspersed with chapters providing broader historical, geopolitical context of the world at those specific times.
So he's constantly grounding the fictional events in global reality, like while Tarzan was doing this, World War I was breaking out here.
Exactly. But where the book truly commits to the bit, where it achieves its masterpiece status, is in its appendices.
Right.
Farmer includes several highly scholarly parodies at the end of the text. There's an appendix called A Case of Identity, another called The Greystoke Lineage, and one titled What Happened to Black Michael, alongside a meticulously detailed chronology of Tarzan's life.
I mean, the dedication to the bit is astonishing. He's citing imaginary sources, building fake genealogies, arguing about dates that never happened.
Oh, yeah.
And the ultimate accolade for this level of detail is that, as we mentioned at the beginning, it actually worked. The book was so realistic, the scholarly tone was so convincingly crafted that it actively fooled readers and librarians. Being shelved in the actual biography section is a legendary achievement.
It is the highest possible compliment for a piece of metafiction. It succeeded in its primary goal, to create a biography realistic enough to convey absolute, unquestionable plausibility. However, we have to be clear-eyed about the book's weaknesses as a traditional reading experience.
Right, because I can easily imagine that reading this might feel a bit like reading a 300-page Wikipedia article about a timeline that never existed.
It really can.
I have to ask, is it actually meant to be enjoyed by the casual reader who just wants a good story? Or is this written exclusively for hardcore Edgar Rice Burroughs geeks who already know the lore inside and out?
The critique of its readability is entirely valid. Many analysts describe it as a plotless work. Because it is rigorously structured as a biography, it lacks a traditional narrative arc with rising action and a climax.
It's not a thriller.
No, it is better described as a direct, sustained argument rather than a story. It is a frenetic attempt to explain every single nook and cranny of Burroughs' original books.
Which means if you don't know the nooks and crannies to begin with, you're going to be completely lost. You're reading the answers to a test you never took.
Exactly. For anyone not deeply versed in Burroughs' lore, it is an incredibly dense, sometimes impenetrable read. And because so much energy is spent on the forensic rationalization of pulp inconsistencies, some of the deeper thematic work suffers.
Like with Jane.
Yeah, we already discussed Jane being underdeveloped, but critics also note that the broader critique of civilization isn't fully realized, because Farmer is simply too busy mapping out imaginary genealogies and fixing timeline errors.
It's the classic trap of world building. You get so obsessed with drawing the blueprints of the house, calculating the load-bearing walls, and wiring the electricity that you forget to put any furniture in the living room. You forget to make it a place where people want to sit down and stay.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
But even with those structural weaknesses, the strengths seem to far outweigh them in terms of long-term cultural impact.
Without a doubt. It sits perfectly at the intersection of traditional narrative and experimental postmodernism. And when Farmer does pause the world building to lean into the deeper literary analysis, it is profound.
Give me an example.
For example, late in the book, he views Tarzan's life entirely through the lens of the monomyth.
For those who might not know, the monomyth is Joseph Campbell's concept of the hero's journey, the idea that every great myth, from Jesus to Buddha to Luke Skywalker, follows the exact same structural path of departing the known world, facing trials, and returning transformed.
Yes. Farmer maps Tarzan's life directly onto this universal mythological framework. And the final chapter, titled The Rest is Silence, moves away from biography and serves as a profound poetic lament for the loss of the natural world and the encroachment of modern civilization.
Wow.
In these moments, Farmer elevates pulp fiction, which was often viewed as disposable trash, to the realm of high art. Tarzan Alive is a brilliant celebration of the genre by a lifelong fan, and its enduring legacy is the monumental Walt Newton world-building concept.
It truly is a love letter. It's
Yeah.
an author using every single tool in his formidable intellectual arsenal to validate the stories that made him pretend to swing from trees when he was a kid. He didn't just read the stories, he built a literary fortress around them to make them real.
He really did.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, think about the pop culture you consume today. Think about the fan wikis you browse for hours, the hour-long lore videos you watch on YouTube explaining the timeline of a video game like Dark Souls or Zelda, the massive interconnected cinematic universes that completely dominate the global box office.
It's everywhere now.
All of that incredibly detailed, obsessive world building, the intense desire we have to make our modern myths logically sound, biologically plausible, and historically connected, owes a massive, direct debt to Philip Jose Farmer. He was the one who sat down in the early 1970s and decided to treat a fictional jungle lord with the absolute gravitas and seriousness of an actual historical king. He showed us that taking fiction seriously isn't a childish endeavor. It's a way to explore how we construct reality itself.
It is a profound testament to the power of shared imagination. It proves that the boundaries between what is real and what is written are far more porous and far more easily manipulated than we like to admit.
Which brings us back to those library shelves in 1972. We like to think we can clearly see the jagged white line separating history from fiction. We trust the categories. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If Farmer was able to write a fictional biography so meticulously convincing that actual trained librarians accidentally shelved it as real, nonfiction history, what happens centuries from now?
It's a great question.
Imagine future historians or perhaps AI archaeologists digging through the digital ruins of our internet. When they uncover our current sprawling fan wikis, the incredibly detailed, hyperlinked lore Bibles for characters like Batman, Spider-Man, or Luke Skywalker, complete with fabricated birth dates, sprawling family trees, and detailed geological maps of fictional planets, will they think they are looking at our fiction? Or will they think they are looking at our history?